If you cannot carry your own tray, maybe stay home, Grandpa. That is what one man said as the disabled veteran struggled with his food. People laughed. One waiter looked away. The old man just kept moving, slow, shaking, silent. But in the back corner, a man in uniform stood up. No yelling, no speeches, just a single action. And the entire diner fell silent. If you believe quiet respect speaks louder than loud cruelty, comment stand with him below. Raymond Ray Dawson, 78, arrived at Molly's diner precisely at 9:15 a.m., just as he had every Sunday for the past 12 years. The retired Marine sergeant moved slowly each step, a testament to the spinal injury he had sustained when his helicopter crashed in Vietnam 5 decades earlier. The doctors had said he would never walk again. Ray had other plans. Today, like all days, he relied on his wooden cane, its handle worn smooth from years of use. He nodded to Jenny, the hostess, who knew his order by heart. Black coffee, 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast. No butter. Morning, Sergeant Dawson. Your usual is ready, she said with a smile. Ray preferred the self-service counter despite his disability. Carrying his own tray was difficult, but it preserved something military. Men like him valued above comfort, independence. He placed his cane carefully against the counter, steadied himself, and gripped the tray with both hands. The journey across the busy diner was slow, deliberate, each step calculated to prevent the coffee from spilling. From a corner booth, for men in matching fishing tournament, and shirts watched his progress. Weekend tourists drinking beers despite the early hour. Look at this one muttered loudly enough to be heard. Takes 10 minutes to cross a room. Ray continued his careful journey, eyes focused on his destination. The window booth where sunlight would warm his aching back. Betty fakes the limp to get the veteran's discount. Another added louder this time. The diner's ambient noise dipped. Marissa, a waitress who had served Ray for years, hesitated by the kitchen door, coffee pot in hand. She had heard the comment, as had several nearby customers who suddenly found their plates fascinating. Ray said nothing. His expression remained unchanged as he finally reached his booth and began the careful choreography of setting down his tray while maintaining his balance. His hand trembled slightly, more from age than the comments, and a fork slipped from the tray, clattering to the floor beside his booth. No one moved to help. Ray paused, considering the fallen utensil and the considerable effort it would take to retrieve it. As he began the painful process of lowering himself, bracing against the table edge, the man directly behind him laughed again. I would help, but I do not do cosplay. Marines. The cruelty landed like a physical blow. Yet Ray's face betrayed nothing. Decades of military discipline had taught him to weather far worse than mockery. He continued his slow descent toward the fallen fork, dignity intact, despite the pain etched in the lines of his weathered face. Marissa finally approached, having witnessed enough. She quickly retrieved the fallen fork and placed a clean one on Ray's table. I am sorry about that, Mr. Dawson, she whispered, casting a disapproving glance toward the corner booth. Ray nodded once. Not your fault, Marissa. He settled into his seat, arranging his napkin across his lap with the precise movements of someone who had spent decades in uniform. His weathered hands methodically prepared his breakfast the same way they had every Sunday since he had first walked through Molly's doors. The laughter from the corner booth continued. Quieter now, but still pointed, designed to reach Ray's ears without being overtly disruptive enough for staff intervention. Probably never even served. That generation loves playing hero. My cousin is in the Marines now. They do not walk like that. Ray cut into his eggs with steady determination, the slight shake in his hand, the only indication that he heard them at all. Vietnam had taught him that survival sometimes meant focusing solely on the immediate task, whether securing a landing zone or simply cutting his breakfast into manageable bites. What no one in the diner had noticed was the man sitting in the far corner booth, dressed in a pristine military uniform with colonel's eagles on his shoulders. He had observed the entire interaction. His coffee sat untouched, his meal uneaten, his attention entirely focused on Ray and the men mocking him. Colonel James Harrison had stopped for breakfast before his drive to Washington for a Pentagon briefing. At 45, with 25 years of military service, he had the kind of commanding presence that did not require volume. He had noticed Ray immediately. Military men often recognize each other, even across generations. The colonel had watched the scene unfold with growing tension, his jaw tightening with each snide comment. When the fork fell and no one moved to help, something shifted in his expression. A decision being made. One of the men in the corner booth finally noticed the colonel's unwavering stare, perhaps feeling emboldened by his friends or the morning beer as he called out, "Hey, Colonel Sanders, want to back him up? Or is your uniform just for show too?" Conversations faltered as the confrontation grew more direct. Ray continued eating, seemingly oblivious, though the slight stiffening of his shoulders suggested otherwise. Colonel Harrison stood slowly. His movement was unhurried but deliberate, the kind of measured control that suggested far more authority than any rushed reaction. Without acknowledging the hecklers, he walked directly to Ray's table. He did not speak, did not introduce himself, did not create a scene. Instead, he bent down and picked up the fallen fork that still lay on the floor. He placed it gently on the edge of Ray's table, then took a step back and stood, not beside the booth, but directly behind Ray's seat. His posture shifted automatically to the formal position of attention. Hands at his sides, feet at a precise angle, eyes forward. The ramrod straight stance of a soldier rendering honor. The diner fell completely silent. It was a simple act, a military man standing at attention behind a seated veteran. But the message required no explanation to anyone watching. This man deserves respect, and I stand with him. Ray glanced up briefly, meeting the colonel's eyes in the reflection of the window beside his booth. A flash of understanding passed between them. The unspoken brotherhood of men who had worn the uniform. One of the waitresses stopped mid-step, coffee pot still tilted over a customer's cup. The hostess at the front counter straightened instinctively, responding to the sudden shift in atmosphere. The men in the corner booth fell silent, their smirks fading as they registered, not just the colonel's rank, but the unmistakable seriousness of his posture. For 30 seconds, no one in Molly's diner spoke. No silverware clinked against plates. No coffee cups returned to saucers. Just the sound of the kitchen fan and the distant traffic outside. The colonel remained at attention, the living statue of dignity guarding an elder warrior's meal. If you have ever wanted someone to speak for you, sometimes they just need to stand. Comment respect if you believe honor still walks into rooms quietly. After what seemed like an eternity of silence, Colonel Harrison finally shifted his stance. He remained standing, but turned to face the corner booth, his expression not angry, but resolute. He reached into the breast pocket of his uniform and removed a weathered photograph in a clear plastic sleeve. Without speaking, he held it up for everyone to see. The photograph, yellowed with age, showed a much younger Ray Dawson in combat fatigues, leading a group of Marines through dense jungle. His face was streaked with mud and what might have been blood, but his expression showed the same quiet determination he still carried. In his arms, he carried a wounded soldier. This man, the colonel finally spoke, his voice carrying clearly through the silent diner, carried me out of a burning convoy outside Da Nang in 1972, 3 miles through enemy territory with a bullet in his own leg. He lowered the photograph slightly, making direct eye contact with the men who had been mocking Ray. Sergeant Dawson is the reason I am alive today. The reason I was able to have a family. The reason I wear this rank. Ray continued eating, his focus on his plate, though his hand had stilled on his fork. This was not a story he had shared with the staff at Molly's, not out of modesty, but because some memories belonged to the past. One of the hecklers shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We did not know, he stammered. You did not ask, the colonel replied simply. No accusation in his tone, just quiet certainty. He turned toward Marissa, who stood frozen with her coffee pot. I would like to cover Sergeant Dawson's meal today. Then, raising his voice slightly to address the entire staff, he added, and I would like everyone here to know that this diner now stands under his name, at least as far as the United States Marine Corps is concerned. From the back of the diner, a door opened. Michael Molly, the owner and namesake of the establishment, emerged from his office. The older man's expression suggested he had been watching the scene unfold through the security monitors in the back. I saw everything, he said, approaching Ray's table. And I would like to ask your permission for something, Sergeant Dawson. Ray finally looked up, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thought. I would like to name this booth after you officially. Molly gestured to the window seat where Ray had eaten every Sunday for over a decade. If that is all right with you, Sergeant. For the first time since entering the diner, Ray's expression softened slightly. No need for that, Michael. There is every need, Molly insisted, glancing around at his silent customers. Some lessons are worth making permanent. The corner booth had fallen completely silent. The men who had been so vocal minutes earlier now stared into their beers, the weight of the colonel's revelation and their own behavior settling heavily upon them. Molly turned to address them directly. Gentlemen, I think it is time you settled your bill. One of them, the one who had made the cosplay comment, stood up awkwardly. Sir, he addressed Ray directly. We owe you an apology. Ray studied him for a moment, then simply nodded once, neither accepting nor rejecting the apology, just acknowledging it had been offered. As the men paid their bill and left, conversations gradually resumed throughout the diner, though notably subdued. Several customers nodded respectfully toward Ray's booth as they passed. An elderly woman stopped to touch his shoulder gently before leaving. Colonel Harrison remained standing beside the table until Ray had finished his meal. Only when the older Marine set down his fork did the colonel speak again, this time softly, just for Ray. Staff Sergeant Thomas was in my unit last deployment. He still talks about you. Says the training manual should just be a picture of Sergeant Dawson with the caption, "Do it like this." A ghost of a smile crossed Ray's face. Thomas, good Marine, terrible poker player. Still is, the colonel replied with a small smile of his own. As Ray prepared to leave, reaching for his cane, the colonel stepped back, not offering help, but offering space for the older man to rise with dignity. When Ray stood, several diners unconsciously straightened in their seats. Marissa approached with his usual check, but Molly waved her off. On the house today, Sergeant, he said, and every Sunday from now on. Ray shook his head. I pay my way, Michael. Always have. Then consider it a standing order, Marine to civilian, the colonel interjected gently. Let us honor you in the way you have earned. 1 week later, Ray arrived at Molly's for his usual Sunday breakfast. As he entered, he noticed something different above his regular booth. A small brass plaque had been installed, polished to a high shine, reading, "Reserved for Sergeant Ray Dawson," still standing. Beneath it hung a framed copy of the photograph the colonel had shown. Ray carrying a wounded Marine through the jungle. Molly must have arranged to get a copy. As Ray made his way to his seat, he noticed the same group of men from the previous Sunday sitting quietly at a table near the counter. When they saw him, they stood, not mockingly, but with genuine regret. The one who had been most vocal approached cautiously. Sergeant Dawson, he began. We came back to apologize properly. What we did was unforgivable. Ray studied,